And Mr. Bosco, are you ready? Wizzie, you
I'm
ready?
ready to roll. Yeah,
All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Pest Expert, November 2024. I'm going to let Mr. Bosco take it from here.
fantastic. All right, thanks, Tammy, for getting all this rolling, and Wizzy, thank you for being here. Well, this is one of the great things that TPCA brings you once a month is our pest expert talk. So it's a fantastic value that if you're not taking advantage of, you definitely should. And by the way, these are all available through the TPCA website, so you can go back and rewatch them and share them with your team or I do that all the time. So highly encourage you to do that. Uh, all right. Well, Lizzie, I'm going to give you a little, your not little, give your introduction here. Lizzie
You
Brown is a senior extension program specialist with the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. She received her Bachelor of Science in Entomology. I noticed you got a mistake here. There's no "the" here. Did you?
uh-huh.
Yeah,
When
yeah.
I graduated, it wasn't the
Oh, okay.
State University.
Okay. So back in your day, it was
It was
just
just
did
Ohio
they have it
State.
just Ohio State University in there? I
Yeah.
didn't know like once you go to Texas A&M, if they require you to drop that off in your bio as part of the kind of indoctrination into Texas A&M. So
Yeah. Yeah.
well, we'll go with Ohio State University and a Master's of Science in Entomology from Texas A&M University. After leaving Texas A&M, Wizzie worked in the structural pest control before taking a job with the AgriLife Extension Service in Austin. You are a board certified entomologist. Congratulations, and that's awesome, with a specialty in urban entomology and holds a non-commercial license from the Texas Structural Pest Control Service. Research interests include red imported fire ants, bed bugs, and termites. So you know how to party, Wizzie. It's awesome.
You know it. Got to hit the big.
Well, so glad you're here and looking forward to hearing your talk today. So take it away. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you
And
so much. All right. So, those of you that know me, hash cockroach proponent. That's what I did my research on when I was in graduate school. So I love my cockroaches, but I haven't been able to research them for a while. So today I'm doing a presentation that I really, really love. And that is about like all of the weirdos we get questions on. And so I'm gonna hold that up and we're gonna get started. And if you guys have questions as we're going along, please feel free to put them into the chat and I will answer those at the end. I'm going to hide the picture of me talking because I don't want to look at myself. Okay, so title here, how to identify and manage the weird random pests. So these are the things that we don't see every day when we're dealing with pest control. I mean, I know when I was in structural pest control and even now, it's like I get more weirdos now, but then it was like, you get the same insect pests over and over and over again. And so that's kind of what you focus on and what you get to know. But then you have those weird ones that kind of pop in, and then you're kind of like, all right, what's going on here? So our first one is this is one that you might actually start getting calls on depending on where you are located in Texas. And so the setup for this one is as the trees are starting to drop their leaves, so depending on what kind of trees that might be now, or if you have live oaks, that might be in spring. So when the leaves fall off of the tree, you might have a customer that sees usually a football to basketball sized shaped paper nest with flying around it. And a lot of times they'll think that it's a hornet's nest or something like that. It's not. It might be, but if it looks like this, then it's not. So these nests are going to be a little bit different. They don't have a centralized opening like the hornet's nests do. They're usually really high up in the branches. And it is a wood fiber, a chewed wood fiber nest that is a paper-like material, but this one is going to be made in layers. And so you can see in the picture there where there's that kind of opening that they have, a very large opening into the nest. And the other big characteristic of these type of nests is they are going to have branches that are incorporated through the nest. And that is going to be much different from a hornet's nest, whereas that's going to be hanging like just from, going to have those branches going through it. So with these, when we look at them up close, we see that these are be a wasp. So it's kind of similar to the yellow jackets and hornets and the paper nests, but these are going to be different, much smaller. These are only about 1/4 of an inch. They are not aggressive. They are capable of stinging though. I went out to a honey wasp nest to kind of see, well, I was just kind of looking at the situation to see what needed to happen. It was right along a walking trail, and this one was low in the trees. And so I was getting up close and personal in their face and, you know, kind of taking pictures and video and poking around and that sort of stuff. And so I ended up getting stung, but I completely expected that. So while I say that the wasps are not aggressive, if you are in their space and they feel like you are a threat to them, they are capable and will sting. So these are going to be very small wasps. They are mostly black, but they are going to have those yellow stripes or rings around the tip of the abdomen. Their abdomen is a very distinct teardrop shape that is very bulbous at the top and then comes to a very good point. And the going to have those paper-like nests. But if you see their nests here, these look very, very different from our yellow jacket and our hornet's nest. So they have that hexagonal cell that they're going to make. And you can tell from the name there, Mexican honey wasps, that these actually do make honey. And that honey is going to be stored in that paper nest. And that is kind of the main reason why they're going to have those branches that are going through the middle of that nest, and they build that paper structure around the nest because they're needing that support from the branches to hold up the nest because it has that honey in it. If it was just a paper nest, then it would be fairly light, but this one actually is storing honey. So typically, if it's high up in a tree and it's not bothering anybody, it really doesn't need to be managed. And that could just be something that you talk to your customers about and say, hey, you know, it's way up there, this off over the winter, you have to worry about it. But if you have a nest or a colony that is low or in an area where somebody can get stung or somebody has gotten stung, then you would need to take care of it. And it's going to be very similar to a hornet's nest or a yellow jacket's nest or a bee or something like that. So you're going to probably, for your own personal safety, make sure that you have the proper equipment. So I would probably say put on a bee suit. That way, if they do come to sting you, they're not going to be able to get through that. And then you're going to want to spray the nest. And this is going to be a little bit easier, in my opinion, than treating a hornet or a yellow jacket's nest, just because those nests only have that single opening, whereas this one is more open and exposed. So you're going to either use I would probably use a residual liquid of some sort and just spray the nest and all around because they're walking around that sort of thing. And then, of course, once they are dead, you might want to go back and check and do a nest removal and get that off property for those people. And this is just to show you the difference. Our Mexican honey wasp is on the top. On the bottom right-hand picture there, that is our southern yellow jacket. So you can see the markings there are going to be quite different. The yellow jacket is going to have yellow and black markings on the head, thorax, and the abdomen, whereas the Mexican honey wasp really just has those yellow rings around the tip of the abdomen where it starts tapering off. And then on our left-hand side, we have our honeybee. And those are going to be mostly a orangey yellow color with some black striping. And they are going to have lots of hairs on their body. And that's kind of the big way that you can tell the difference between wasps and bees. Bees tend to be fuzzier or hairier than wasps. Some wasps are going to have hairs on their body, but it's not to the extent of bees. All right, this is another one that's going to start coming up. I'm sure if you've been into the stores lately that you have seen that the poinsettias are out and people are starting to get them and buy them. I saw somebody buying one at the store the other day. And so at this point, you have people, and this doesn't just happen to be with poinsettias. It could be essentially any indoor plant. But this time of year with the poinsettia is really prevalent here. So you go into an office or a home, they have poinsettias in there. And when people have these poinsettias, they are going to love them a lot. And a lot of times that means that when they go in there during the day, they their plant and they water their plant every day, which is usually going to lead to a situation where it is overwatering and that soil is really, really wet. And that leads us to fungus gnats. And like I said, it doesn't have to necessarily be poinsettias. It can be other plants as well. If somebody has plants and watering them, whether those are house plants or whatever, that can lead to this situation. So fungus gnats are going to be small. They are flies. They only have 2 wings. They're typically a dark brown to black color, and they're going to have very long legs. They have long antennae, and their larvae are found in overly moist soil. So soil that has been overwatered, essentially, if we're talking about houseplants, or if you have a water leak outside, you can get fungus gnat issues. And so a really good thing to do if you have customers that have any sort of plants in their office or homes is make sure that you explain to them that they really need to only water those plants when the soil is dried out. So changing up that water schedule is going to allow the fungus gnat population to decline on its own, just because they have to have that really wet soil, because the larvae are actually feeding on fungus and stuff that develops in that overly moist soil. You can, if you want the kind of quick knockdown, you can do a drench to the potted soil. And if you have a kind of a large office building that has an atrium situation where they have indoor plants and stuff, that could be a little bit more difficult when you're managing, because in that case, you can have a very large space that needs to be treated. And so in that case, you might want to do some sort of a drench to that soil. Another solution that you can use is the Bacillus thuringiensis variety israeliensis. That is the same product that we use to treat standing water for mosquitoes, or the mosquito larvae in this case. You can use that as a treatment for fungus gnats. So that would be something where you sprinkle those bits or whatever on the soil surface and then water them in. And so that's going to carry down into the soil, and the larvae will eat it and they will end up dying. So that is another one, especially if you have customers who, again, have larger areas, or if they're on a organic or green or whatever marketing terminology you want to do it, where it's a low impact pesticide that they're looking for. So here are some of our small flies. Our fungus gnat is the one that is in the top middle picture. Some other ones that you might find or might be mistaken for fungus gnats, on the upper right-hand side, we have a drain fly. These are also known as moth flies. And these are usually going to be in moist, organic areas. So you can have them coming out of septic tanks. They can get into drains, hence the name drain fly. So their larvae are going to feed on that slime layer that kind of builds up in drains. So those ones are going to be small. They're usually a light brown to gray color, and they're very fuzzy or fluffy looking. On the bottom right-hand side, that is known as, this one has a whole bunch of different common names. Phorid fly is a common one because those are in the family Phoridae, but they are also sometimes called humpbacked flies, and that is because their thorax has that curvature that gives them a humped back appearance. They are called scuttle flies because these, while they can fly, they often will scuttle across surfaces and then kind of do this little hop fly thing. They are also called coffin flies because there are some species that will lay their eggs in corpses and or decaying bodies, whether that's animal or human. I guess we're animals too, but anyway, so that when the larvae will hatch out, they come out of those coffins. So that's where they get the name coffin flies. But again, very similar areas as to drain. You're going to have that funky, moist, organic matter that those phorid flies can come from. And so essentially, anytime that you're dealing with small flies, you really need to locate the source and get rid of that source. And that might be something that you do. That might be something that you talk to your customers about doing. And then cleaning up that area and fixing whatever it is. It might be, you know, for phorid flies, I've seen them in commercial kitchens where they're in a mop bucket, the mop in, and it's just got that funky, moist, wet area. Or if they're not hanging up the mop to dry properly, then that could be there. They can get into drains. They can get underneath tiles that are broken. And when they mop the floor, that builds up that moisture. And so it just, you know, essentially any funky area, you can get phorid flies. On the upper left-hand corner is our other small fly, and that one is going to be a fruit fly. So those ones are typically going to be small, wings folded over their back. A lot of them are going to have red eyes, but not always. And those are going to be typically in overly ripe fruits and vegetables. So if you see those, look for that fruit, and it might be that something fell in between a counter space or behind something. So just pay attention and make sure that you are thoroughly searching those areas. Okay, our next one. I just dealt with one of these with a company here in the Austin area. I want to say last week. So the situation here, we have a renovation going on. So this could either be a renovation or it can be new construction. So in this case, in this picture, we have, you know, somebody tearing stuff out and completely renovating an area. So what's going on here is they start having these tiny bugs appearing near the renovated area. And a lot of times they are going to be attracted to light. So they might get trapped in light fixtures or on windowsills or things like that. And for these ones, these are plaster beetles. And these are very, very, very small. I cannot express how tiny these are. So you see in the upper left-hand corner, there is a nickel and also a pin there to kind of give you an idea of these beetles. These are very, very small. They can be anywhere from a light brown to a dark reddish brown in color. And then if you look at the head and thorax, like you see on the right-hand side there, it is going to be more narrow than that abdomen. The thing here is these are going to feed on fungus. And typically what happens when they do that renovation, if they close things up too much, if they close that wall space up before it thoroughly dries out, then that moisture can stay in that wall void, grow fungus, and then these beetles are going to be in there. And then they start emerging out as adults, and the adults are attracted to lights. And then that's when you typically start seeing them. So again, this is one of those things that if you're controlling them, you want to focus on managing the adults. And that could be something, if you want, you can just recommend that your customers are going to them up. If you do a treatment for them, you could use a residual spray in the area. And if you do that, just make sure that you communicate with your customers that the adults are going to continue to emerge out of that area until it completely dries. But you have put down the residual spray, so the adults that do emerge, when they come into contact with that spray, they're going to end up dying. And that is very important that you do that communication, because if you do not, then adults continue to emerge out, you're going to get a call back because they're like, hey, these beetles are still coming out. Yes, that's the point, but we sprayed for them. So when they do come out, they're going to end up dying, and then you can vacuum them up. So again, communication is going to be really, really important there. So the other small beetles that we have, so we have our plaster beetle, of course, on the far left, and it is much, much smaller than these other beetles here. So we have a flower beetle in the upper middle size, or upper middle picture. On the right-hand side, we have a sawtooth grain beetle. Those are going to have the little sawtooths on the thorax. And then on the bottom right-hand side, we have our anabiid beetle. And so just so you know, and I'm not going to delve into this any further, when you look at anabiid beetles, there are the cigarette and drugstore beetles. Those are stored product pests. But we also have anabiid beetles that are wood-boring insects. So when you find anabiids, if you're not finding a source, make sure that you know which kind you are dealing with, whether that is a stored product or a wood-boring beetle. But you can see all of these are relatively small. They're all kind of that reddish brown color, but the three that are on the right-hand side are going to be in stored products. So grain, plant material, or in the case of anabiids, possibly wood. So again, finding the source is going to be key. But you can also see the plaster beetle on the left, how its body looks different. It's going to have that tiny head and thorax, and then that abdomen is going to be much wider than that. Whereas the red and confused flower beetles are more streamlined, so are the sawtooth grain beetles. And then of course, with the anabiid beetles, their head is going to be deflected downward, and they have that very humped back shape to their elytra, their hardened wings. All right, this is another one. If you haven't gotten calls yet, I am going to assume that it is going to happen soon. So here's our situation. So this typically happens starting now and going into winter. And usually the call that you get, they say that they have these gnat-like insects that are collecting in large numbers on their windowsill. And if you go out there and you look at them more closely, they are not gnats. They're going to have a kind of roof-like appearance to their wings, and they are going to be a tapered body shape. So these are the hackberry psyllids. These are a type of Homoptera, and they have piercing, sucking mouth parts, typically found outdoors on hackberries, and they are going to feed on the seeds of the hackberry trees. So these are very small. They are a mottled brown color. And like I said, their wings are going to have that triangular shape over their body. These feed on plants. They don't bite humans. They don't live on humans. They are essentially a nuisance pest, but they can occur in large numbers. And a lot of times the call that I get, and when I tell them what it is, they're like, well, I don't have a hackberry tree in my yard. This is Texas. Somebody has a hackberry tree somewhere nearby because hackberries are all over the place. So just because they don't personally have a hackberry tree does not mean that they are exempt from this. So essentially here you can see on the right-hand side, these are very small insects. And for traditional screens, they can fit through that screening, which is why they can often get into the indoor windows and then they end up dying on those windowsills. So a good thing here that can happen, I mean, just if your customers are okay with it, vacuum them up or sweep them up off the windowsills, they're dead. So you can just throw them away. You can do exclusion or encourage them to do exclusion. It would require them to get a finer mesh screening and put that on their windows. Again, it depends on what type of expense they want to spend, because that can be very pricey if you are replacing all of the screening with a finer mesh. For you, you can work on the outside of the structure to keep those hackberry psyllids from moving indoors. So you're going to focus with residual sprays around door and window areas. And then the other thing for exclusion, not just screening, but if they have weather stripping that is in poor repair, it doesn't have a good seal around doors or windows, they would need to replace that as well. And, if you point that stuff out to them and say, hey, this is going to help you in the long run, not just for this particular insect, but it can also help with spiders and scorpions and roaches and, all sorts of stuff, fixing that weather stripping, then that might be an easier sell to get them to kind of help you out. But that is one of those customer communication things that you need to talk to them and explain why. Because if you don't give them the why, then they're going to be like, well, I don't need to do that. All right, here's our next one. I'm sure I'm hoping that everybody knows what that one is. So this one is, that's obviously an American cockroach. So those are our large cockroaches that we get. Those are the ones that are capable of flying and the ones that can typically be found outside, but they can move indoors, especially at this time of year. So when we start getting these weather changes, that's usually when things start moving, because just like us, we want a nice cozy place to spend those colder temperatures. The insects and arthropods also want those nice cozy spaces. And so a lot of times that's going to lead them indoors to our structures, and that can be problematic. So here we have a customer, they call you and they say that they're seeing these weird looking house flies. It's like they kind of look like a house fly, but it doesn't quite look right. And when you go out to inspect, you find larger cockroach species, and that could be American cockroaches, that could be Australian, That could be Oriental. It could be the smoky browns, any of those. So you find the cockroaches when you're inspecting. But what is that weird looking housefly? So this is the insect that the customer is talking about. These are known as ensign wasps. And the reason why they get that name is if you look at their abdomen right here, it looks like a little tiny ensign. So it comes at the top of the thorax, and it's this very tiny, tiny abdomen. And then they're going to have those very long, prominent hind legs. So essentially with these, people will find these more so in their homes than they will the cockroaches, because as we all know, cockroaches are nocturnal. They're typically going to be moving around at night when we're not really active. But the ensign wasps, they're going to be out and flying around during the day. And I found one of these a couple of weeks ago in my dining room, which didn't surprise me because I found some smoky brown cockroach nymphs as well. So I know something dropped an egg case in here. I don't know where it is. So I need to bait. But with the ensign wasps, this is really, if you see these, it is signaling that there are cockroach problems. So you really don't need to go out and do anything for the wasps itself. If anything, I would leave the wasps. And this is another one, good customer communication here. If you explain this, hopefully they'll be impressed and then they'll leave them alone. But you can explain to them that the ensign wasps are going to lay their eggs in those larger cockroach species egg cases, or the ootheca. And then when the wasp egg hatches out, they will actually eat those developing cockroaches. And so it's a way of controlling them biologically. So you have insects that are controlling the other insects. So leaving those ensign wasps alone can actually help reduce the cockroach population even quickly, or even more quickly. So for you, one, explain to them about the ensign wasps, encourage them to leave them alone. But two, you need to go in and control the cockroach populations. So that's really going to be dependent on, treatment. I would, if they're having the cockroaches come in, one, again, talk to them about exclusion and things that they might do to kind of help keep those cockroaches outside. Me, I know I need to replace weather stripping around my doors because both my and back doors have damaged weather stripping from my dog. I know that. I will get around to it. But as far as treatment indoors, you really want to focus on those crack and crevice treatments. And you can either do that with baits. Cockroach baits are a really great one to utilize. You can also use dust treatments in wall voids or weep hole areas. So when they are moving in through those structures or coming in through the wall void areas, they have that dust. If you are putting out a residual dust, you want to make sure, especially for cockroaches, you want to make sure it is a very light, thin layer. If you put a really heavy layer of dust, cockroaches are just going to avoid it. You want it so it's very light and thin so they don't even realize that they're walking through it. The other thing is treatment on the outside. Where are those cockroaches getting in? So again, targeting around the foundation, doors, windows, things like that. And then, of course, if you're using baits along with a pesticide, make sure that you are not using those in the same area. Make sure that you separate those so you don't contaminate your bait. So this is to show you the difference between our ensign wasp, which is on the left-hand side, and well, that one's actually a blowfly, not a housefly. But you can see that they are very different. If you look at them more closely, flies are only going to have 2 wings. Our ensign wasps are going to have 4. Flies are going to have very short antennae. The ensign wasps are going to have long antennae, and then the legs on the ensign wasp are very, very long compared to those on the muscoid flies, like house flies, blowflies, flesh flies, stuff like that. This is another one that's going to start popping up. So we have a lot of acorns coming off of the trees right now. And I know a lot of people like collecting those acorns and bringing them in and using those as decorative elements in their home around fall. Or if you do preschools or schools, a lot of them will do sensory bins based on the seasons. So they might have acorns and pine cones and leaves and things like that. So if you're seeing something like this, then that could lead to insect problems. And that is the acorn weevil. So the weevil that you see in the upper left-hand corner, that is our acorn weevil. So the adults are going to be brown beetles. Since they are a weevil, they're going to have that very elongated snout or rostrum. And these are going to get about 3/8 of an inch in length, and that doesn't count the rostrum. So we're going head to the tip of the abdomen there. The larvae are going to be a creamy white grub-like insect. They do have a well-developed brown head, but they are legless. And these are anywhere from 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch. So a lot of times you don't see the larvae because they are going to be inside of the acorns. And when they are ready to come out and pupate, this is where people usually start freaking out. They will cut that little circular hole in the acorn and they merge out so they can then go, to the ground and pupate. So outside, this would be in the soil. But if you have them inside, if I have a decorative display on my dining room table or something, and then all of a sudden I have these worm-like things coming out of it, I might freak out. Well, if I were a normal person, I might freak out. Me, I'm just gonna be like, oh, cool. Hey, what's that? But just be aware, people might have problems if they're bringing acorns inside. Now, if they're treating those acorns, like if I bring in acorns and I put them either in the freezer for a couple days, in the oven on low heat to kill whatever might be in there, that can take care of whatever might be residing inside of those acorns, and I wouldn't have that problem. So if your customers want to do that, then explain to them this is the easier way to do this so you can avoid this problem in the future. So our acorn weevil here is on the bottom right. We have 2 common stored product pests that we are also, they're also weevils, so they also have that elongated snout, and these are the rice and granary weevils. So the rice weevil is up at the top right, the granary weevil is on the left. And rice weevils are going to be a reddish brown color, kind of a dullish reddish brown, and they're going to have 4 light spots on their back or their elytra. Granary weevils are going to be more of a brown to black and very shiny. And both of those are going to be infesting stored product goods. So they're going to be typically in the kitchen, but they can also, if people have, those rice heating bags or something in the bathroom, they might be coming out of those areas as well. All right, here's our next situation. So this one, this is kind of like my house, unfortunately, or at least what my husband thinks our house is. So I like plants a lot. And so I have areas in my house that I have a lot of plants. So if you have customers that have this, whether they are at a home or in an office or something, and they have lots of plants, keep an eye out for this. So this one is going to generally be a humid area of the building. And it may have plants, usually, well, in my case, it would be around the plant areas, but it might just be a humid area. So this could also happen in a bathroom if they're not turning on the fan when they shower. And so you kind of get that humidity building up. And this one, the person calls into you and they complain of itching or they feel like they are being bitten by insects. So anytime that somebody is complaining about itching or they say that they're being bitten by insects or something like that, please, the first thing that you need to do is go out there, place out sticky traps in various locations, label those sticky traps with the area that you put them in the structure, leave them for a week, and then go back and pick them up and look at what is on those sticky traps. Do not feed into whatever the person is saying. Just say, we need to put out these sticky traps so we can figure out what is going on here before we make any sort of recommendations, because this can lead to a very difficult situation if you have somebody that has delusory parasitosis, which, you know, I really should do another TPCA people. If you want me to do a presentation on delusory parasitosis next year, please let me know, because I think it would be a really good one. But if you have somebody that has delusory parasitosis, then that can lead to a thing. If you tell them, okay, hey, it could be this, this, and this, don't give them any ideas, figure out what the problem is, and then go in there. So the person is complaining of being bitten by something. There's areas of high humidity, and these are what end up on our app. So these are springtails. These are a very primitive insect, very small. There are different body shapes here, but a lot of them we see are going to have this elongated tail that they'll use for jumping. They like release it and it kind of springs them through the air. But these are always going to be associated with areas of moisture. So if you have springtails, there is a moisture problem somewhere nearby. That could be a water leak. That could be, like I said, they're not turning on a fan when they're showering and the humidity builds up. It could be house plants that are in the area. And essentially here, that moisture level needs to be reduced. So a good thing that you can do is encourage them to get a dehumidifier and run it in that area, and then find whatever that moisture source is and reduce it. So this is really going to be about reducing the moisture that is causing the problem, because you can go in there and spray for the springtails, but it's really not necessary, because you can kill them off just because of that moisture source being removed. This is another one, kind of the same similar areas. If you have a moisture problem, or again, customers are complaining of being bitten, this is another one that you can have, and those are the sosids or the book lice. These are a very small insect. Again, they're kind of a yellowish white color, long antennae, typically wingless when we're talking about book lice. And they look like somebody punched them in their face, and they've got a big old fat lip. So that is what this little thing is right here. That is called a clypeus. It just looks like, you know, it's like a big boofy area on the front of their head. And these can also get into stored products when they are stored in areas that have moisture. So you can see there on the Quaker oats. I have gotten these a lot of times in my mealworm colonies that I rear on, like wheat germ and oatmeal and things like that. If I don't have enough air circulation in the colony, then I get book lice in there and I end up having to chunk the whole entire colony. So any sort of damp conditions, but with the springtails and the book lice, while they are there for the moisture, the whole itching sensation or feeling like they're being bitten by something that the customer complains of sometimes, that is generally a dermatitis. They are not biting that customer. They're not infesting them. They're not living on them. They're not burrowing into the skin. But what happens is their exoskeletons can cause an allergic reaction with some people. And so that can cause that itching sensation because these are very small insects. So when they molt into the next stage, that exoskeleton is very small and it can become airborne. And if it lands on somebody and they have that allergic reaction, it can cause that itchiness. So to solve this problem of itchiness, you need to track down where that is. And that's why I recommend when you put out the sticky traps to label them with the room where you place. That way, when you find something on those glue boards, you can look and say, oh, this was in the guest bathroom. So that is your source area. And then you don't have to go back and, look for where they're located because you already have that information on that trap. All right, our next one, firewood. Firewood is going to be, people are going to start bringing that in for wintertime, get the cozy fire going on. And when people bring firewood into their home, they can bring all sorts of stuff. They can bring in cockroaches, they can bring in scorpions, they can bring in spiders. So we really recommend that people don't bring in tons of firewood at a time. So maybe a couple of pieces at a time, and then, leave the rest stored outside underneath cover away from the structure. But listens to us, right? So when they do bring in that firewood that has been stored outdoors, it's nice and cozy inside. And when they bring that in from outside and it's been cold outside and it's nice and warm inside, stuff starts to emerge from that firewood because it's nice and cozy outside, inside. So this is probably the most common one that we get actually coming from the firewood itself. And this is a locust borer. It is a type of wood boring beetle, not really problematic structurally, but it does get into firewood. So these are about 1 inch in length. They are yellow and black, and they're going to have that kind of W marking on the elytra. The legs are going to be a reddish brown color. And for this one, it's just they're coming out of the firewood. So it's not necessarily problematic per se. They can just burn the firewood as normal and it's going to take care of the issue. But a lot of times when people start seeing these, especially when it's in the dead of winter and it's cold outside, they're like, well, how is this coming out of stuff? They don't make that connection that, oh, hey, I brought in firewood. It could be coming from there. They kind of think it's coming from somewhere within the structural timbers. So if they can, keep the firewood outside covered and bring it in small batches and just bring in what you're going to burn for that day. So these are some of our other firewood nuisance pests. We have our scorpions and spiders. We have different types of ants. The two most common ones, we have the carpenter ant that is at the top. So of course, those ones are fairly large, some of our largest ants that we have. And carpenter ants can be black, they can be reddish brown, they can be yellowish, they can be orangish, they can be any combination of those. And those are going to nest in wood. Same thing with the acrobat ants that you see on the bottom right-hand side. Those ones are much smaller than carpenter ants, but they also will nest in wood. So a lot of times they will be in the firewood as well. More firewood insects, of course, we have our roaches. These can be the smoky brown roaches that you see in the upper right-hand corner there, but it can also be oriental roaches. It could be American roaches. It could be the wood roaches. I've seen Suriname cockroaches in firewood. It just, cockroaches. We also have a crustacean. So the roly-poly or the pill bug, those are going to be in areas of moisture. So they're usually down at the bottom of the wood pile. And then at the bottom too, on the left-hand side, we have a centipede. And then on the right-hand side, we have our millipedes. So all of these are mostly going to be nuisance insects, but people do need to be aware that they can bring these in with firewood. This is why we encourage people to store the firewood away from the structure. So when you have it, it's not close to the structure and having these things be able to be close to the house and get in much easier. So this is me. If you have questions on stuff, if you need stuff identified, please feel free to email me, use me as a resource. I am more than happy to help y'all out. And then if you want more information about insects, we do have podcasts. Bugs by the Yard, we are still actively recording that. That one we just deal mainly whatever insects. The Unwanted Guests podcast that you see on the bottom, that was our structural focused podcast. We're no longer recording new episodes, but all of our old ones are still available to stream. And we've done cockroaches and termites, and we even did like rodents and bats and things like that. So check that out if you want more information. And then if you're on social media, I do short video clips of bugs that I'm seeing. It's called Backyard Bug Hunt. So you can search either for Wizzie Brown or Backyard Bug Hunt, and you should be able to find me. All right, so I'm going to pull up chat and see if there are any questions.
I
Does
don't
not.
think I up with any. I was making notes as you were going through. I was like, book lice. We need to talk about book lice, and I was like, we need to talk about delusional parasitosis. And you seem to hit everything. So that was a fantastic presentation. Loved it. I know I will definitely be showing my team the program, the presentation. So I encourage everybody to use it that way. You can go to TPCA's website, log in through your member into the member site, and then you can pull these. I think Tammy, what does it take you probably about a week to get this up and going?
We'll have it up by next week, by the end of next week.
Yep. So in the meantime, there's plenty from all the years for the last year we've been doing it. So I would rank this up there, Wizzie, as one of the more interesting, fun presentations for sure. So I thoroughly enjoyed it.
I have to agree. That was really cool.
But if you want to do one on delusory parasitosis, just like a whole entire presentation on one next year, let me know, because it's a hot topic. And while we can't necessarily do something as professionals, there are certain ways that you really need to handle it and talk to people and stuff like that.
We haven't covered that topic, have we? Yeah, let's do it.
Let's just plan on it. I'll look at what I have so far. I think we're getting up. I think our next one is April, but I don't have someone scheduled, but I'll double check and I'll email you because that sounds awesome.
Yeah, is April our next one?
No, I'm already booked up through, so I think
Okay, I got next
I'm saying my
available.
next available needing an instructor would be April, but I'll double check and get back with you today.
Yeah, so Tammy, will we be doing, is the 18th going to be our next one?
That's with Laura Rosenwald from NPMA, and it's going to be the World Wide Web over spiders.
Oh, cool.
It ought to be good. So yeah, everyone tune in. Registration is already open, so just go ahead and join us. I can't wait. Wizzie, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was great. Y'all have a fantastic Thanksgiving and